Well, hello everyone. Today is Friday, June 1st, 2018. This is our Power of Personal Growth class where we work on deep self-discovery, working on obstacles that may be getting in the way of our happiness or our moving forward towards our goals. And what I've been doing is going out to everyone the day before and asking questions. So I'm going to start right off with what questions came back to me yesterday. So there are two questions that came back to me yesterday. One was, how do we help ourselves feel worthy and dispel shame? So we get caught up in feeling just completely worthless, and we get caught up in feeling ashamed of ourselves. How do we get out of that mental trap? And then another question that came up was, how do we deal with grief and growing through it? And so, because those are the questions that came up, that's what this class is going to be about. I thought what we would do is start with those deep, deep, yucky feelings. So we talk kind of cognitively at Aspire. We have a model. We talk about every time you have an emotion that's a signal, it's an unmet need, and you need to get the need met. And that's all well and good, but when you're feeling absolutely horrible, sometimes telling yourself doesn't snap you out of it very quickly. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is what do we do? So the first thing I want to basically say is that these are normal feelings. So feeling hopeless, feeling worthless, feeling ugly, stupid, unlovable, just horribly lonely, these are all very normal feelings. And the goal as you go through your personal growth work isn't so much to get to a state where you never have those bad feelings. But what we're going to talk about today is that there's kind of a healthy version of those bad feelings that actually helps us move to a better place. And then there's an unhealthy version of those bad feelings that keeps us sort of paralyzed and keeps us in a very bad place for a very long time. So I want to talk about tools that we can use to deal with those emotions when we have them and move to a healthy version of those emotions, which, can be just as painful, but often doesn't last as long. So let's talk about grief and loneliness just as examples. And I would say worthlessness and some of these other really bad feelings kind of follow the same pattern. So know that all humans need to be connected and belong. So we all have that need of belonging. We all need a tribe. And one of the things that we do kind of as our ongoing journey, part of creating a life around our core values, is I encourage all of you on our private calls and in our classes to do what you can to consciously create an inner circle for yourself. And that inner circle, in some cases, could be your family, but in most cases, it's going to be a combination of maybe one family member or a few very close friends. It could include a spouse, but it doesn't have to. But it should include a small group of people, 3 to 5 people that you feel that you could really, really count on emotionally when you're feeling bad, people you can reach out to and feel comforted by and reassured by. And you yourself have to be one of those people. So that's part of getting our own needs met, is you have to play a big role in being one of your own support system, one of your own sources of comfort and assurance. So what ends up happening is, let's say that we have a loss. Let's say we got dumped by someone who we were absolutely in love with, or we're going through a divorce, or let's say we're losing our company, or we just got rejected. So all those things can make us feel horrible about ourselves. So that is actually a really normal feeling. And it's actually a healthy feeling. So if you notice this girl on the swing here, that horrible loneliness, it makes you think about how you need other people. And in a healthy person, what it tends to do is guide us to reaching out and seeking support and love for others, thus creating that inner circle again. So essentially, the cycle is, when our circle gets broken, when our inner circle gets broken, someone we trust betrays us, someone leaves, someone dies, any of those things can happen, that's going to hurt awfully. And the idea is that biologically speaking, when our inner circle breaks, the most productive thing we can do is process the pain and rebuild our inner circle. And our emotions guide us to do that. So we have our pain due to loss and loneliness, but that leads to the desire to connect and the healthy behavior of reaching out and bonding with others. So then we become this little teddy bear, cute teddy bear looking for a friend. And that's sort of the healthy version of the emotional cycle. The other thing to keep in mind is that feelings are made of energy. And you know, we've all probably heard this from one degree or the other, but we have energetic auras around us, and you may have done some studying on this if you're interested in this sort of thing, but even if you're not, you probably notice that you're affected by other people's emotions. So you probably notice that when someone is really sad around you, that sadness kind of seeps into you. When someone is really happy around you, that happiness can seep into you. So people's emotions are energetic, they're contagious, and they affect each other. But part of that also is that our feelings are energy, and they tend to flow through us. So typically, if you'll notice, we tend to have a steady state, and our steady state can be different based on who we are, but typically we're going to experience a feeling and then go back to our steady state. So we may be exceedingly happy, and then we're going to calm down and go to sleep. Or we may be exceedingly sad, but at some moment in time we're going to feel better. And that's typically the way our feelings go. They work as signals to us. They are situational. They go up or they go down, but they tend to go back to the steady state, and that's in the normal situation. So typically they will flow through us and dissipate. So when you're feeling really bad, one of the biggest tools you can use is reminding yourself that no matter how horrible this feels right now, it is going to flow through me at some point. And usually it's sooner than later. In other words, grief tends to come in waves. So instead of saying, oh my God, it's going to take me 10 years to get over this or 2 years to get over this, what you could say is this is a wave. It's kind of like a contraction when you're having babies, right? This is a wave, and it's going to flow through me, and I'm going to feel a little bit better, and I might even feel a little bit better in an hour, right? So it will flow through. Now, the only thing that can stop that from happening is if we have a story, and the story traps it. And let me give you an example. Let's look at a couple of stories here. So here's story number one. This person had somebody reject them, and it hurt so bad. People wouldn't leave me or treat me this way. If I were worthy and valuable, I need to be different or I'll never feel loved. So let's say that's the nature of her story. Well, what that does is that isolates her, because now she's putting it all on herself. She's blaming herself for being left. She's blaming herself for how other people treat her. And when you blame yourself for how other people treat you, that puts you in a bind, because that means you have to be someone you're not in order for someone to treat you differently. And we can't be who we aren't. So then we're putting a lot of energy into trying to prove ourselves to other people or trying to be something we're not. And that leaves us in a fairly hopeless condition. So that's an example of a story that can trap emotional pain for a really long time. And that's why at Aspire, we look at stories a lot, and we ask you to be aware of your stories. So let's look at a different story, okay? This person still has that same grief. This person still got rejected and they hurt, right? But she has a little bit of a different story about it. She says, I'm feeling this grief because I loved well and I allowed myself to be vulnerable. This pain will come in waves, but I have so much to give that I'll love again. So she's trusting that she'll love again, and she sees her grief as specific to her situation, not to who she is. That in itself is pretty powerful, because now it's not she who has to change, it's a situation that has to change. And we know that it's a lot easier for situations to change than for ourselves to change. And then she has this inherent value of self-love. she's taking care of herself. She's valuing herself. She's being her own best friend. She's being that one person in her inner circle that can reassure herself and help herself through the pain. And she has a belief that love is abundant and it includes plenty of hope for future relationships. So here she is. I like this picture because for some reason when I feel pain, a lot of times I'll go and sit by an ocean or sit in nature. And I believe that this idea that energy is contagious really helps because I know that I always feel better when I sit in nature, and I've heard that from others too. And sometimes I feel like the energy of the ocean or the energy of watching the trees swaying in the breeze, that's a lot of peaceful energy. That's a lot of kind of universal energy that's kind of peaceful and quiet. And I allow that to seep into me, and that almost always calms me down. So I'm going to stop right here for a second because I did have a couple of questions. So, how to deal with difficult situations and not get caught up in wondering what's going on in life in the background and moving forward in a healthy way. Trying to know if this inner circle friend is actually a masked enemy that isn't being frank. And also someone who presents. So what we're talking about is all of a sudden having doubt and not trusting someone in your inner circle. So that's a really good question. I think we should discuss it a little bit when I get through the presentation. But for those of you who are listening to the recording, I think the core of the question here is what happens when your inner circle is starting to break or you're thinking it's starting to break. So you have someone in your inner circle, you're supposed to trust them, but you're not sure that you're really able to trust them. And of course you would have emotional pain through that. And that's when you really do have to think about your stories. But if they're a person that you trust, typically you're going to want to have a conversation about that. You're going to want to have open dialogue and talk about what's going on, because they wouldn't be in your inner circle if you can't have that kind of dialogue with them. And we'll talk a little bit more after the presentation about how to have that dialogue. What I want to do is talk to you about how all this maps to our Aspire models. Okay, so we talk about having an abundance or scarcity. And in the two stories that we just talked about, I would say that this person with this story has a sense of abundance about love. And this person with this story has a sense of scarcity about love, because she's saying the reason I don't get love is because I'm not good enough to get love. And when she says that, she makes it scarce because she has to be a certain way in order to receive this love. But on the other hand, the person with this story is saying, there's a lot of love out there and I'm a loving person. So even though I got hurt now, even though these people in my inner circle I can't trust, there will be other people. And then I guess another thing related to that question is, if I'm starting to suspect people in my inner circle of not really being in my inner circle and not being trustworthy, then it's really high time I start building an inner circle out of other people. So maybe these people don't get to be in my inner circle if I can't trust them. All right. So if you feel abundance about love or about acceptance or about those needs that you have, it's going to be a lot easier to get through the painful moments. But if you feel scarce about them and you're blocking the love by having a story about it, which is I have to be different from who I am to get love, then it's going to be a lot harder to get through these periods of pain. And so what do we do about it? Well, let's look at the other model. So let's just look at it based on love. So we have an unmet need for love and connection. If we have a scarcity belief, so anyway, if love is an unmet need here and we have a scarcity belief about it, then it's usually going to take the form of people will only love me if I'm worthy of that love or if I'm deserving in some way. And we'll all have different stories about what makes me worthy or deserving of love. But based on what we believe makes it scarce, it's usually about me. And then my survival belief is usually how I feel like I need to change in order to deserve that love. So maybe I need to be pretty or cute or sexy or desirable or good or smart or interesting. I mean, it could be any number of things. For every one of us, it's going to be different. But our survival strategy is going to be to constantly try to prove to ourselves and others that we are those things. And it's going to take a lot of effort, and the collateral damage is that we're going to stay in relationships that are unhealthy, or we're going to tolerate bad behavior relationships because it's so scarce to get a new relationship. So why should I leave the one relationship I have? It causes that clingy behavior. Why should I leave this relationship? Because who knows what else is out there. Whereas if you're feeling more abundant about love, you're going to be less tolerant of bad behavior in a relationship. You're going to talk about those issues when you can't trust people or you're starting to worry that they're not there for you. And you're going to have authentic conversations, and it's going to be easy for you to move somebody out of your inner circle. You don't even have to cause a big fuss about it. You could just say, okay, I can't trust this person, and you're continuing to actively build relationships so you have an abundance of people who are right there for you who could move into your inner circle. Let's take this a little more practical now, okay? What can we do step by step to deal with these deeper emotions and to change the story? Because it's easier said than done to change a story. So the first thing is you can't change a story if you don't notice it as a story. So you want to notice your story. What's the voice in my head saying to explain my pain? Remember that if you're talking about your pain in terms of it coming from a situation that you're in, it's usually a little bit healthier. And it can include hope and healthy coping behaviors like moving to a new situation. However, if your story is telling you that you're bad or that you're the reason for this, it kind of traps you in that feeling that this is not going to ever end because I am who I am. And no matter how much you want to change who you are, you know, our goal is to become more of who we are, not less of who we are. Once you start noticing your story and noticing where it's coming from, what you want to do is use observation logs and proactive and conscious questioning to reality check your beliefs. So how do we do that? Well, you may be all trapped in your own thinking about yourself, but if you have a story and you recognize it, let's say I need to be really pretty in order to be deserving of love, then you can get out of yourself and ask what makes others deserve love. So is everyone in the world who's loved, are they all really pretty? And then you can start actively looking for examples of people who are not pretty and who get lots of love. And then you can say, well, think about what determines whether or not you love somebody. So are all the people you love pretty? And is the only reason you love them because they're pretty? Chances are that's not true. So what is it that evokes the feeling of love within you? And you use that as a piece of evidence. And then maybe you can go so far as making a list of the people who you absolutely have all the confidence in the world have loved you. And have they only loved you because you were pretty? Or why do you think they've loved you? And step by step what you do is you establish evidence that love isn't based on worth. So that's kind of the end of the topic. What I'm going to do now is check and see if there's any other questions in there. I don't see any other chat. So I think what I'm going to do now is stop the audio and we're going to have a class discussion on it. But for any of those who are listening to the audio right now, I've got the contact information right down here at the bottom. So if you have a question, all you have to do is send me an email.